In this video, I'm going to cover everything you need to know about managing debt, and we're starting right now. Hey guys, Elliot here. So for this video, we're going to do part 4 of my online educational masterclass series. If you missed part 1, which is all about credit, or part 2, which is all about savings, or part 3, which is all about budgeting and spending, check the links in the description below, and they will take you right to those videos. So grab a pen and paper, take some notes, and let's go cover everything you need to know about managing debt. As always, if you enjoyed this video and find it useful, please do subscribe to the channel, helps me out a lot, and don't forget to smash that like button. Okay everyone, welcome to the Personal Finance Masterclass. This is part 4, Managing Debt. It's made up of 4 sections entitled Basic Concepts, Categories and Types of Debt, Avoiding Getting into Debt, and Paying Back Debt. Let's start with section 1, which is Basic Concepts. Strictly defined, debt is the money owed to someone else, usually a creditor. Many people, however, define it as something that causes them constant stress. It's important to note that debt, as a general concept, has a positive side. Without debt, most people won't be able to buy big ticket items such as homes and cars or send their kids to college. Companies use debt to start up and expand their business, and debt is actually a key piece of a capitalist economy and allows the economy to grow and expand. The problem is when debt becomes a way of life and overwhelms our ability to repay it. Debt should be a relatively minor component of a healthy economy and a healthy personal finance situation, and it should not grow to be an all-encompassing entity. Yet here we are as a nation, we're pretty much drowning in it. We acquired debt early in life, educational loans, car loans, the first credit cards, etc. It's all easy to rack up and difficult to get rid of. Of course, it doesn't help that we live in an economy driven by consumer spending, and with historically low interest rates, which only recently started to rise, access to easy credit practically begs for debt to accrue. How in the hole are we exactly? Well, our collective debt includes $1.6 trillion in student debt, $1.2 trillion in auto loan debt, and $817 billion in credit card debt. The total national consumer debt approached $16 trillion in 2021, with a big chunk of that being mortgage debt. The average American now carries about $38,000 in personal debt, excluding home mortgages, and with mortgages included, rises to about $155,000. Additionally, only 23% of all surveyed adults say they have no debt whatsoever. Paying off personal debt, however, is very much doable and should be a priority for anyone wishing to establish financial security and build wealth. Let's now go through the concept of debt piece by piece and then see what can be done to actually accomplish this. So before we move on to section 2, be sure you understand everything just covered, including all the following terms and definitions. Be sure to pause the video and define all of these to yourself, and review the last section if you're not sure about any of them. Okay, this is section 2, Categories and Types of Debt. So in discussing debt, you first have to classify it into 2 main categories: secured and unsecured. Secured debt is a type of debt that is backed up by tangible collateral, not just the creditworthiness of the borrower. These types of loans generally have lower interest rates since the lender has a lien on a physical asset to repossess in case of default, making these types of loans less risky. Examples of secured debt includes mortgages and car loans. Unsecured debt is a type of debt that is not backed by any collateral and is based strictly on the creditworthiness of the borrower. These types of loans are considered riskier, and the lender generally charges a higher interest rate to offset this risk. The best known example of an unsecured debt is a credit card, but there are others. With these 2 categories of debt defined, let's now list the possible types of debt consumers and some small businesses can have. A few of these were already mentioned, but here's a complete list. The first major debt to list is mortgage debt. This is of course the money borrowed to pay for a primary residence or investment property. It is secured, fairly low interest rate debt that is backed up by tangible property, which can be repossessed in case of default. American mortgage debt totaled up to about $11 trillion in 2021 and is by far the largest consumer debt by amount. The second major debt to list is student debt. This is of course the money borrowed to pay for higher education, whether it's to attend a university, college, or trade school. It is an unsecured but still fairly low interest rate debt. American student debt totaled up to about $1.6 trillion in 2021 and is the second largest largest consumer debt by amount. The third major debt to list is auto loan debt. This is of course the money borrowed to pay for the purchase of a vehicle such as a motorcycle, car, truck, or RV. It is a secured, fairly low interest rate debt that is backed up by the vehicle, which can be repossessed in case of default. American auto debt totaled up to about $1.2 trillion in 2021 and is the third largest consumer debt by amount. The fourth major debt to list is credit card debt. Now, everyone knows how credit cards work. You charge some amount during a 1-month billing cycle and generally pay it off at the end. If you do, this debt is not counted. If, however, you do not and carry the balance into the next month or longer, it does get counted and you do accrue an interest on the unpaid balance. Credit card debt is an unsecured and a very high interest rate debt that is generally considered to be quite toxic to your finances. American credit card debt totaled up to about $817 billion in 2020 and is the fourth largest consumer debt by amount. These are the four major types of debt that everyone is familiar with, but there are a few other significant ones which we'll list next. Medical debt is a fairly widespread one, with about 1 in 3 American adults carrying a balance, with half of those carrying over $1,000. Medical debt is of course money owed to medical providers for medical services, and this can happen due to a lack of or inadequate insurance coverage, but can also arise from uninsured elective procedures. Medical debt is unsecured, but usually carries a fairly low interest rate. IRS or state tax debt is another debt of concern, and this arises from back taxes and penalties owed to the Internal Revenue Service, to the state of residence, or sometimes to a local city or municipality. In the case of federal and state taxes, this can affect you if you're a 1099 contractor and get paid without any taxes withheld. Now, of course, you still owe taxes, and those are usually estimated and paid quarterly so as to not have a large bill at the end. And here's where you can get into some financial trouble if you don't make those quarterly payments and then can't afford the tax bill at the end of the year because you spent all your money. Tax debt is of course unsecured and can carry a fairly high interest rate as well as penalties, so watch out. As of 2021, U.S. residents owe about $527 billion in back taxes to federal as well as state governments. Other less commonly known but still significant debts include the unsecured payday loan debt, which is a controversial but widely used type of short-term loan used in the subprime market, as well as title loans, where your car's title is used as a collateral. Small businesses can have small business loan debt, which is money borrowed to start up or sustain a small business, and farms can have farm loan debt, which is money borrowed to sustain a farm, similar to a small business loan. We won't discuss them as they don't really apply to as many consumers and are more specialized forms of debt. While it may not seem immediately apparent, there is in fact something called good debt, and it is important to define what that is and differentiate it from the bad debt. A good debt is one that will allow you to acquire something that will either grow in value or generate income, thereby increasing your net worth. A lot of good debts also have low interest rates. A bad debt, in contrast, is when you acquire something that will lose value or does not generate any income, or basically anything that makes you lose money and lowers your net worth. Bad debts often also carry high interest rates. What are some examples of good debt? There are a few that financial planners agree on. The best kind of good debt is a mortgage for primary residence. You're buying a historically appreciating asset that also features some great tax advantages. Another good debt can be a student loan to attend college, but that depends on what you're studying. If it'll make you good money after graduation, then it's a worthwhile investment. If not, it may turn out to be a bad debt liability. Business loans are often considered good debt as they're used to fund the creation or expansion of what is hopefully a money-making business operation. Now, auto loans are in a bit of a gray area. If your car makes you money directly, such as if you're a delivery or Uber driver or renting it out, or it makes you money indirectly by allowing you to get to work and you choose an affordable vehicle in line with your income, well then it's certainly good debt. However, if the vehicle is really expensive and you can't really afford it, it will definitely cross over into bad debt. So what about bad debts? The best examples of those are credit cards and payday loans. There's also a bit of a gray area with credit cards. If, for example, you spend a few $1,000s for a new computer and some software that will in turn allow you to operate a graphic design business, then that qualifies as good debt, especially if you pay it off quickly. On the other hand, putting the latest gaming console on your MasterCard doesn't qualify, no matter how much you think it will enhance your well-being and productivity, which it probably won't. As you can see, the key here is often the intent and the extent of the debt being taken on. Even with good debt, there's a limit on how much you can overextend yourself before it crosses over into bad debt. So before we move on to section 3, be sure you understand everything just covered, including all the following terms and definitions. Be sure to pause the video and define all of these to yourself, and review the last section if you're not sure about any of them. Okay, this is section 3, avoiding getting into debt. We all know we should not get into debt, or at least minimize the extent of it, but how? Here are some specific ideas to avoid or limit debt as applicable to the big 4 debts listed earlier. This may certainly seem like an easier said than done discussion, and yeah, the hard truth is that many of these will require a bit of patience, tough choices, and some self-sacrifice. The first discussion will be about avoiding or minimizing mortgage debt. It's difficult to completely avoid mortgage debt when buying a house unless you have the cash on hand to pay for the property in full, or don't mind having a house full of roommates whose rent can pay your mortgage. Now, only about 20% of all home buyers are able to pay for a house in cash, and many of those are deep-pocket investors. And as far as having several roommates, that's certainly doable for some folks, and this approach is called house hacking, but it's obviously not an option for everyone, especially if you don't wish to play the role of landlord, or you have a family and there's no room for anyone else. So if we exclude that, what else can you do to save money and decrease the mortgage payments? Here are a few more approaches. The most obvious one is to not buy more house than you can afford. There's generally no need for a McMansion for your first house, and as a general rule of thumb, the value of the home you're looking to purchase should not be more than 4 times the household annual gross income. Also, if the exact location isn't of utmost importance, consider out-of-the-way properties for significant savings. Another idea is to try to save up the full 20% down payment or more. This will avoid private mortgage insurance, or PMI, and may also get you better interest rates. Try to shop your loan carefully, especially if you have excellent credit. You can save quite a bit on your interest by comparison shopping, even in a historically low but rising interest rate environment such as now. Run a calculation to see if paying points and thereby lowering your interest rate even further makes sense for you. It generally does if you're not selling your home for a certain number of years. And finally, consider occasionally renting out a room in your property on Airbnb. A week or 2 of rental income may make significant dent in your monthly mortgage payments, and you can pick and choose when you want to do this and not be stuck with a roommate full time. The second discussion will be about avoiding or minimizing student debt. This is a very fast-growing debt burden, outpacing car loans and credit cards here in the US. Getting educated is a necessary and worthy goal, but there are numerous ways to avoid student debt, or at least lessen it greatly. At the risk of stating the obvious, the most direct way to a free or low-cost education is to use someone else's money. This generally refers to academic scholarships, sports scholarships, grants, and tuition reimbursements. If you qualify for any sort of scholarship, even a partial one, take it. If your company pays for graduate school, don't delay in taking advantage of that. Also, research if your personal situation qualifies you for any assistance from your school of choice or from the government. Be sure to exhaust all public sources of funds before turning to more expensive private loans. There are numerous books and websites on the subject of seeking out education money. You just have to do a little bit of research. The other well-known way to avoid any school expenses is to have the military pay for it via enlisting in one of their services, but that's a major life decision that we won't get into here. There are a few other approaches, of course. If you cannot eliminate educational expenses, then minimizing them is the next best thing. To that end, go to a state school versus private, or attend a lower division community college for 2 years before going to a more expensive upper division school. Such community colleges, of which there are over 1,100 in the US, are a bargain, and most deliver education that is on par, if not better, than the first 2 years at the big schools. Here's also a major tip for the future, such as when, for example, you have a young child. Open up a 529 savings plan for school and college expenses. A 529 is a tax-advantaged account that can only be used to fund educational expenses. It's of course too late if you don't have one set up by the time you go to college yourself, but you can always set one up for a child who's years, if not decades, away from needing this money. The sooner, of course, the better. The third discussion would be about avoiding or minimizing auto loan debt. Let's state a very important fact here. Cars are not investments, they are an expense item and a depreciating asset. With that in mind, here are some approaches to avoiding or minimizing auto debt. The best way to avoid an auto loan is not to get one by purchasing a relatively inexpensive used car in cash. Letting the previous owner take the depreciation hit can save you a tremendous amount of money, and you can still get an excellent 2 or 3 year old vehicle by shopping the most historically reliable manufacturers such as Lexus, Toyota, Acura, Honda, and and at least more recently makes like Hyundai, Mazda, and when it comes to trucks, Ford. If you must take out an auto loan, get it from your own bank or credit union, not the dealership. Be sure to negotiate the car price aggressively and watch for the numerous junk fees that the finance office will throw at you, especially if buying a new vehicle. There are major auto insurance savings possible if you buy a used car and pay it off in full. You can then just get liability and not collision coverage. The reasoning is that with a used vehicle, you can pay for your own repairs out of pocket in the rare event of an accident. Always, however, maintain as high of liability coverage as you're able to afford. Finally, it's worth mentioning that you can offset your car payments by occasionally renting out your car on a site like Turo.com. It is a viable business, but the major downside is that you won't have use of your car for a certain amount of time in the week, and of course the wear and tear. The fourth discussion will be about avoiding or minimizing credit card debt. This is perhaps the most important debt to avoid given the sky-high interest rates on unsecured credit card balances. It can also be the most difficult one to control due to the ease of use of credit cards. However, you have to understand and never forget that your credit card limit is not your money. It is money that you're borrowing from the bank that issued the card. The best possible financial advice with regards to credit cards is the following. Only have one credit card and only use it when you have the cash in your bank account to pay it off every month. A good trick is to purposely keep your credit limit low to prevent the possibility of impulse purchasing major items. As your income and net worth increases, additional credit cards or higher credit limits may be justified, but in all cases, pay off the balances on time. We'll discuss the best approaches to pay off credit card balances and other debts in the next section. So before we move on to section 4, be sure you understand everything just covered, including all the following terms and definitions. Be sure to pause the video and define all of these to yourself and review the last section if you're not sure about any of them. Okay, so here we are, section 4, paying back debt. This topic may sound pretty self-explanatory. After all, can't you just say, duh, just pay it off? But what we're talking about here are some specific techniques to speed up repayment of several debts on a fixed budget, which of course describes what a significant number of people are up against. Now, this is all presuming you've tried other approaches like earning extra income, selling unneeded possessions, applying any tax refunds or bonuses toward the debt, and living frugally with a budget. Let's suppose you're already doing that, so then what are the most effective approaches to paying off your debts? The first method of debt payback to discuss is called debt stacking, and sometimes also referred to as the debt avalanche. With this method, you would arrange all of your non-mortgage debts according to the interest rate they charge from highest to lowest. The order of payoff would be an order of descending interest rate regardless of the debt amount. So you would take the highest interest rate debt first and pay in as much as you possibly can while maintaining the other debts with minimum payments. We can illustrate this with an example. Let's say you're a freelancer with 4 debt obligations. You have a leftover IRS tax bill for $4,000 which carries an 8% interest, a student loan balance of $26,000 with 4% interest, a credit card balance of $10,000 at 18% interest, and finally a car loan for $8,000 at 6% interest. So after rearranging according to decreasing interest rate, you would then have credit card, IRS tax bill, car loan, and finally the student loan. You would then make minimum payments on the bottom 3 debts while sinking everything you had into the 18% card. When that is done, you would work your way down to the 8% debt, then the 6%, and then the 4% one. The advantage to this method is that by tackling the high interest rate debt first, you will save quite a bit over the long haul. The one major downside of this approach is psychological. Because the method ignores the actual amount in favor of the interest rate, you may be stuck paying off the largest debt first and will see little progress initially. Eventually, it will accelerate, hence the avalanche name, but it may be a while. This method is best for more rational mathematical folks who trust the numbers behind the technique. Most, of course, are not this way, and for them, there's the next method we're going to discuss. The second method of debt payback to discuss is called the debt snowball. With this method, you will arrange all of your non-mortgage debts according to their amounts, from the lowest to the highest, and then try to knock out the lowest amount first before moving on to the next. So if we keep the debt numbers from the previous method, we have the following slight rearrangement. The $4,000 IRS tax bill is first, followed by the $8,000 car loan, then the $10,000 credit card debt, and finally the $26,000 student loan. You would then make minimum payments on the bottom 3 debts while sinking everything you had into the $4,000 amount on your IRS debt. When that is done, you would work your way down to the $8,000 car loan, and so on. The advantage to this method is purely psychological. You will eliminate the smallest of the debts fairly quickly and feel like you're making progress, which may motivate you to keep going more than ever. Mathematically, of course, you will end up paying more in interest as that super high high 18% interest credit card will get little attention for a while. Debt payoff is like dieting, however. We all know what needs to be done, but whatever method is psychologically most doable is the one that will be followed. The third method of debt payback to discuss is the balance transfer. It's a technique that mostly applies to credit cards. The idea here is to open a new credit card that has a significantly lower interest rate than your current one and transfer your existing balance to it. Many of these low or 0% interest rate cards only offer this for a limited time, 6 to 12 months usually, so it can be a bit of a hassle to continuously open new lines of credit, transfer balances, then repeat the process continuously, but considering that you will not have to pay any interest in that time frame, it may be worth it. Note that doing this too often will ding your credit, so look for lengthy offers of 0 or low interest rate APR. The fourth method of debt payback to discuss is the consolidation loan. If you have good credit and have a number of debt accounts, it may be a good idea to take out a consolidation loan from a bank or credit union. The main reason to do this is to consolidate everything into one payment. This is especially good in a time of low interest rates and you have several credit cards you need to consolidate, since credit cards are never low interest apart from a promotion. The bank will issue a payoff amount for each separate debt and you will then have just one low interest payment to make. Be sure, of course, that the loan's interest rate is not higher than the rates on your debts. Once your debts are consolidated into one payment, it becomes easier to manage and will also save you money and interest. Okay, let's go ahead and review section 4, including all the following terms and definitions. Be sure to pause the video and define all of these to yourself and review the last section if you're not sure about any of them. Okay, so this is the end of the managing debt tutorial. I hope you enjoyed this video and got a lot out of it. If you did, please do consider subscribing to the channel and turning on notifications so you don't miss any of the upcoming financial and investing videos just like this one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys soon.